And this is why economists often manage to come to agreement on propositions that are very controversial with the rest of the public, because many things that economists think transcend ideology. Right? They manage to agree on things that almost everyone else thinks are wrong. Okay, now go to something that Dirk was talking about. When you go and ask economists, so what's going on here? Why is the public has these views about economics that seem to be so wrong? There's a standard story called rational ignorance, which has very widely been promoted. Okay? And just to understand the mentality here, economists are the kind of people who say, look, granted this is true in fact, but is it possible in theory? Does the theory allow for it? And if it doesn't, I don't really believe it. Right? This may seem very dogmatic, but it's not that crazy. Right? After all, if a physicist sees a helium balloon, he doesn't say, oh my God, physics is wrong. Rather say, oh, well, maybe the theory actually allows for helium balloons. Possibly. Again, my understanding of physics is that it does, but correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So the standard story that people are given is something called rational ignorance. Just says, look, people don't bother learning stuff when there isn't very much incentive for them to learn it. Okay, so the story is the public doesn't know very much about economics because learning economics doesn't really pay. You can get through life just fine without understanding whether or not free trade is good for the economy. Okay, that sounds good. One problem here is that at least the way that economists usually think about rational ignorance is that it actually rules out systematic error. Okay, normally we think about ignorance as just adding on more coin flips. Right? But now but a much more important argument is that if it were just rational ignorance, it doesn't explain why people who are uninformed aren't just agnostic. Right? So agnostic, a great and underused strategy. Right? So anyone here have any opinions about ancient Sumeria? No? Right, because you haven't studied ancient Sumeria, so you don't have an opinion about it. That is what a rational person does. When you don't know something about it, you say, I don't know, I have no idea, I'll defer to people who've studied it. That's it. Right? And maybe I don't really don't know, that's it. Okay. So what's interesting about areas like economics and politics is the people who don't know what they're talking about have opinions anyway. And so it's very hard to find a person who doesn't have an opinion on whether or not we should keep products out of Japan. Very unusual you find such a person. And yet when you talk to people like this, and, if you teach introductory economics, you often will, say, well, so could you explain what's wrong with the standard textbook case in favor of trade with Japan to me? Right? And of course, the answer is they don't know what the standard textbook case is. In fact, I'll mention here my dad. So my dad, he was a very smart guy. He's a PhD in electrical engineering. And yet he has long believed that the solution to all economic problems in America is to first impose a naval blockade of Japan. Right? Or actually now this has been expanded to include all of Asia, because you never know, China, never know what bad thing will come out of Asia. Let's just blockade the entire continent to be safe. And second key solution is a Berlin Wall at the Mexican border. And once we achieve these two things, everything will be great. Right? Right? So when I talked to my dad, when I was younger and more idealistic, I would say, look, you have to understand the textbook case here. And, but after a point, I said, look, Dad, tell me what's wrong with the textbook case. Doesn't know the textbook case. He's never opened the textbook. Wouldn't have any idea what the textbook case is. But he knows that the solution to all of our problems is nevertheless to keep these foreign products out. Right? This is very strange to me, and yet something that is quite commonly observed is that people who don't know what they're talking about aren't agnostic. They refuse to be agnostic. People have opinions even though they don't know what they're talking about. Even though it's pretty obvious that they don't know what they're talking about, even to them, because they can't tell you what the other side is. Okay? Now, another problem with rational ignorance is it doesn't explain why people get so emotional about these subjects. But it's not like when you go and tell people, say, I think free trade is better for the economy than protectionism. Generally, people who disagree with you don't just say, oh, that's interesting, please explain your arguments. I'm curious. Instead, you're much more likely to get people yelling at you, getting hysterical, and saying, what kind of a person are you? Do you want our whole country to be destroyed by these foreign products? You're an evil, evil man. So on. You're more likely to get that. Right? So hysterical screaming. Right? Now, if you don't believe me, I encourage you to drop in on a meeting of a political group with which you disagree, and then in a very friendly and polite way, explain your disagreements to them and see whether you make a lot of friends. Okay? I predict you will not make a lot of friends. Actually, my wife/lawyer will want me to say, no, I don't actually advise you to do it. But hypothetically, if you were to do it, if you were to go to the club that represents views that are very different from your own and start, in a very polite way, sharing your views, they would not thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts and for providing information that they otherwise could not have obtained. Rather, you are likely to be getting some glares and yells and shouts, and you might even be told not to come back. Once when I was an undergraduate, I was told not to come back to a club, just because I happen to disagree. Okay. All right. Now here I again often think about the case of the tariff. So how would in the 90s, Clinton imposed a tariff on Mexican oranges. Now I would think so. How would my dad react to this news? Right. Well, according to rational ignorance, his reaction would be something like, it's about time that we're finally getting tough on the Mexicans. Right. His reaction would not be, there's a Mexican orange tariff. I never heard about that, huh? right? Or his action certainly wouldn't be, what's a tariff? He knew that, right? But according to rational ignorance, his reaction should just be, I didn't know about that. Rather, his reaction is more along the lines of, it's about time we finally got tough with the Mexicans. Their oranges are destroying our entire country. Or maybe it's too little too late. Can the country come back? Right? Probably not. Okay, so this leads me to my alternative, which I call rational irrationality. Okay, so the question that I'm asking here is this. Why exactly is it that people would be rational some of the time but not others? So again, my dad, if I were stuck on a desert island, he's probably the person I would pick to try to get me off. Because he's an electrical engineer and he knows how to do stuff. He's very good at doing stuff. When someone at the car dealer tells me what I need to do, I call him up and he tells me if I really need to do it. And his answer is very good. Okay? However, on these other areas, for example in economics, his views seem to me to be completely fail-worthy. Right? If he were a student in my class and wrote down on the exam when he tells me in person, I would just give my dad an F. Yes, perhaps that is my dream. One day my dad will be my student and I will get the chance to either make him change his mind or receive an F. But unlikely to happen, but I can dream. Okay, so why would people be rational some of the time but irrational at other times? My answer here is we can think about irrationality as a good that we use to protect comforting beliefs from reality. Okay, so here's the big problem with being rational all the time. You might have to change your mind. If you were rational, if you were open to logic and evidence, then someone might present some argument that requires you to think something you don't currently think. And who wants to do that? Who wants to have to change his mind about something? It hurts. It hurts to have to say, I was wrong, and my friends are wrong too. Right? We were all on the wrong side of this. Right? So one book that I like very much is called The God That Failed. It is a bunch of autobiographies of ex-communists. Not one of them ever said, after I found out that communism was false, I was so happy to have learned the truth. Every single one of them said, well, I was so miserable to learn that I'd been wrong, that I devoted my life to lies, and I lost all my friends, and my wife divorced me because I wasn't a communist anymore, and it hurt so much. Right? None of them were happy to have found the truth. It was miserable for them. Right? So these are the guys who actually switched. So how much pain would have been involved for the people who didn't switch? Admitting that you're wrong hurts. Okay? So as long as you're rational, though, you're always vulnerable. You might have changed your mind at the drop of a hat. Someone comes up with an argument, and you say, oh my God, I've been wrong my whole life. All right, time to admit it. However, if you are irrational, if you are closed to logic and evidence, you can keep believing whatever you want forever. Then you're safe. Right? If you just say, look, I'm going to be irrational about this, or you don't even have to say it, just be irrational about something, then you'll never have to change your mind. You can keep believing whatever you believe right now until the day you die. You're safe. Okay, so now you might think this would then lead people to never admit they're wrong, but there is a problem with denying reality. Sometimes denying reality has consequences. Okay? So sometimes when you make a mistake, it actually hurts you. Take, for example, a doctor who believes that he's such a great doctor that he can operate perfectly well while intoxicated. Right? That's a very comforting belief, and for the doctor's ego, it's like, I'm such a great doctor. I'm better drunk than other doctors are sober. Right? So it has a lot of appeal. Right? And yet, I'd say very few doctors have this belief. Is, if you were to be irrational about this, you would wind up risking your whole career. You'd probably wind up losing your license, and you'd go to jail. Okay? So here's a subject where, while it's a very pleasant belief, the cost of having that belief is actually extremely high. On the other hand, there are other beliefs where you can be wrong for your entire life, and it really doesn't make the slightest bit of difference. Right? There are many subjects where the subject is just not sufficiently related to daily life to change anything. Right? So, for example, your view about who won the War of the Roses in the 1500s England. Okay? Think whatever you want. What is it going to cost you if you're wrong? Right? Or view in philosophy. Like, what is it going to cost you if you believe in free will versus determinism? What's really going to change? Right? Or you have your views about evolution versus creationism. So since it's a Baptist school, I won't say which view is right, but merely whatever view one holds, you could have that view for as long as you want, and your life is not going to change very much.